We're going to get moving. This is welcome everybody to the 2026 Wildfire and Smoke Outlook event. It's the first time we've done this, and hopefully it's beneficial for everyone involved. We've got some folks on Zoom, and we've got some folks participating down in Missoula at the Missoula Public Library as well. My name is Adam Yong, and I'm a community resilience specialist who works for Glacier Climate Smart Glacier. Did the mess up there on my own. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Climate Smart Glacier and what we do, and then talk a little bit about the panelists real quick, and then send it over to Amy in Missoula, and our first speaker will be presenting from Missoula with Amy. So we are a nonprofit here that serves Flathead Valley, and specifically we're focused on building resilient communities in the Flathead Valley for severe weather events and natural disasters that occur. Essentially more flooding, more fires, more severe storms that we're experiencing, not only here, but around the nation. And to address those, we have three primary programs. We have a program we kicked off last year, which is our flood awareness program. And the flood awareness program is focused on what would happen in the event of a 1964 scale flood. We had a massive flood here in 1964 that was between 500 and 1,000-year flooding event. We also had other floods that have been similar size, and they don't happen on 500-year intervals. They happen much more often than that in the valley, similar with our 100-year event floods that would occur here. So that's focused on flood awareness as well as hazard mitigation so that we maintain our pristine water quality here in the Flathead Valley. Our second program is youth engagement. We always have a youth board member. Eleanor Smiley has been on our board for a year. She's in Columbia Falls High School and part of the Columbia Falls Climate Crew. And on a strategic planning session, she mentioned how youth kind of feel unempowered to be engaged or to be active in any sort of community resilience building or programs going on within the community. And so we're launching an initiative to try and provide a platform to hear what it is that they would like to be engaged in and try and link them up with volunteer opportunities or other opportunities that they can participate in to feel like they're making a difference here in the Valley. And our last program is our wildfire health program. It's what has brought you all here today. And we have three primary initiatives in our wildfire health program. That is, first and foremost, our HEPA filter program, which we've been running since 2020 with Logan Health. We've been distributing HEPA filters similar to the one behind you back there that you can actually register to win if you want to sign up for our newsletter. So we distribute HEPA air filters to Logan Health. Their nurse navigator identifies individuals with medical conditions that makes them more susceptible to wildfire smoke and are also low income. And then they have the option of taking a free HEPA filter home with them. We've distributed about 200 of those air filters to date, and they're going to continue that program. Our second initiative is our child care clean air pilot. So we received a grant from the Fire Adapted Communities Network to provide HEPA filters to two child care centers. One's an at-home child care center, and the other is the Head Start Child Care Center here in Kalispell. And we provided HEPA filters for their classrooms. Children are an at-risk population because their lungs are still developing and they respirate at a much faster pace than us, so their exposure is much more significant to wildfire smoke. And we hope to expand that program as well. And then our third initiative is the Clean Air Centers, which we received a grant from the Department of Public Health and Human Services. And that grant is a pilot program that was originally started down in Missoula and Ravalli County, where they created the first clean air centers. And the intention of the program is to be able to replicate what we learned from creating clean air centers in different facilities to improve the indoor air during wildfire smoke events and unhealthy air conditions. And so we are partnered on this event with Climate Smart Missoula because they were the first one to kick off the clean air centers, and they've got their 6 or so down there. And our clean air centers are the Whitefish Community Library, the Columbia Falls Community Center, and the Gateway Community Center in Kalispell. All were chosen, one, because they wanted to participate. It's a volunteer opportunity for them. They wanted to improve the indoor air and got a little bit of money, obviously, for them to help do that. And they're also a space where community can actually go and gather and hang out with your family, and there are activities you can do for extended periods of time. It's not a 24-hour sanctuary, but it is a spot you can go during their business hours to get clean air. We have indoor air monitors, purple indoor air monitors at each one of those facilities, so you can compare what the indoor air quality is at that facility compared to an outdoor purple air monitor within a reasonable proximity. They also have resources in case you want to learn, as we do in the back, about how you can create a cleaner air environment at your own home. With that, I will pitch the HEPA air filter giveaway after this event is going to be our drawing for it. So if you want to get on our newsletter or try and win that HEPA air filter, it's about a $200 value and will help clean the air in your home. Our speakers and sponsors next, like I mentioned, the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. They've also designated, and the governor has made a proclamation that this is Montana Wildfire Smoke Ready Week. June is when you get a lot of prescribed fires, and so we start having some smoke, smelling some smoke. It's much different kind of smoke than a massive wildfire in terms of the impact it might have on your lungs. But it's a great time to start looking at what you can do to seal up your home, to buy a HEPA filter, to create a box fan, be prepared in case we do have wildfire smoke events. Climate Smart Glacier, obviously, Climate Smart Missoula, both sponsors. We have FireSafe Flathead, and Mike West is going to give a presentation about home hardening and defensible space here in a little bit. We have the Montana Climate Office as a sponsor, and Kyle Bocinsky is going to give us a presentation about what we can expect as the climate shifts here over time. And our final sponsor is Missoula Public Health. Lastly, we have a QR code we'll throw up at the end of this. If you would fill out, it takes you to a survey. It's like 9 questions, but 3 of those are for Missoula. So that whatever location you're in, you can fill that out for your location, what you'd like to see done more of if you want to see this event in the future. We'd really appreciate it if you took a minute to fill that out. And we run off of grants and donations, as does Climate Smart Missoula. So if you're interested in donating, we've got a QR code in the back. We have a little donation jar. We would really appreciate that if you could pitch in. For our attendees joining on Zoom, the survey link will be sent out to you in a follow-up email after the webinar concludes. And we have the Q&A function enabled so you can ask questions in that manner throughout the event. And we'll be monitoring that in real time and answering some of those, but also asking some of those of our panelists when we get to the end. All right, Amy, I'm going to throw it over to you. You're on mute, Amy. Mute. Amy, you're on mute.
Okay, now can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I think so. Okay, great. Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. I think we learned these things, but yeah, this is a bit of an experiment. We are connected with the folks up in the Flathead. Smoke doesn't know jurisdictional boundaries, so it's been fun to try to pull this together and learn from each other as we go. I'm going to speak a bit at the end about some climate smart and a little bit about wildfire smoke and impacts to our health. But before I get to do that, I am going to introduce Alex. He's going to jump up here. Our first speaker is Alex Lukinbeal. I was going to want to make sure I got it right. Sorry, my notes just says Alex Lukinbeal, who is a meteorologist for the Northern National Weather Service in Missoula. He's worked as a weather forecaster for the past 12 years, primarily in Montana, also Colorado and Utah. Alex also serves on the Missoula Air Quality Advisory Council, which supports local government and agencies for the purpose of improving indoor and outdoor air quality. So we're lucky to have Alex here. I'm going to pull up the slides, so just give me one moment. And after Alex speaks and gives his presentation, it's going to bounce back to the Flathead. I think that's working. Here you go, Alex.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. One of my expertise within the National Weather Service is really in the realm of fire weather and air quality. And for those of you who do not know the National Weather Service, we're a federal agency that's really tasked with helping provide weather and water information for the protection of life and property and the enhancement of the national economy. So for those of you who see the watch warnings and advisories, like the winter storm warnings, the red flag warnings, those are the types of products that the Weather Service issues. And one of our big roles is we coordinate directly with a lot of county, state, and federal agencies, such as the Department of Transportation, the U.S. Forest Service, and so let's jump into this wildfire.
Hold on 1 second.
Oh yeah.
They're not seeing. Let's see. I know, isn't this crazy? We shared our screen, but it sounds like you guys are seeing the presenter mode and not the full screen. So let me just see if I can try this again.
Sweet.
Okay, does that make a difference to the folks in?
Yeah, that looks better.
Is that better?
Yeah, we've got the full presentation on that. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, let's forge ahead here. So let's jump in to the seasonal temperature and precipitation outlook. So this outlook is created from our colleagues at the Climate Prediction Center. And so one of their core functions is they provide kind of large picture outlooks of temperature and precipitation across the United States. And what I want to show in this graphic is the areas shaded in red is where the Climate Prediction Center is projecting to have higher confidence in above normal temperatures. So zooming into our neck of the woods here in Western Montana, anywhere from about a 50 to 70% chance of seeing that above normal temperatures. And then if you look at the chart on the right, that's the seasonal precipitation outlook. Not as confident on the precipitation outlook as the temperature, but it is leaning drier than normal across northwest Montana and north central Idaho. So we have a few people in the office who are really interested in providing research into climate and trying to understand how seasonal weather patterns influence our weather locally. And so there's about 3 or 4 meteorologists in the office who spend a lot of time looking into what we call analog years. And analog years are seasons where we have a similar snowpack, temperature, precipitation regime from a winter season transitioning into this summer. So we look at historical weather patterns over the last 3 months and what those patterns created to help us project locally what our weather patterns are going to look like this summer. And so these are the talking points that our office has put together that help to expand upon that national view that we just looked at from the Climate Prediction Center. So locally, a few things that stand out is we are transitioning to an El Nino summer. And El Nino it's basically a large scale circulation in the atmosphere where it's influenced by warmer than normal water in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. So you have a really large, imagine you just have a bathtub of really warm water in the Eastern Pacific. And with all that warm water, it's ripe for tropical activity. So that typically lends itself to more hurricanes and tropical storms in the Eastern Pacific off of the western coast of Mexico. And those storms can influence our weather pretty significantly throughout the summer. So locally, what we found in these analog years is we have higher confidence for June and July to be warmer than normal. And with that, there's kind of an increased risk for some potential heat waves, especially later this month into July. And with that, tropical activity in the Eastern Pacific, we tend to see an increase in the monsoon. And the monsoon it's a circulation in the desert Southwest that creates a lot of thunderstorm activity. And with the combination of the Eastern Pacific tropical activity and the monsoon, we're seeing potential for August to kind of transition and move towards above normal precipitation. Some of the analog years that we looked at include 2009, 2015, 2018, 2023. And you'll notice that if you look at the amount of acres burned, so in the Northern Rockies, we're looking at kind of Western Montana and North Central Idaho for our forecast area. And you'll see that the amount of acres burned varied significantly throughout these analog years. But overall, 3 of the 4 years were less than normal. If you look at a wildfire season, how many acres are burned. The one anomaly there was in 2015. But one thing that complicates the overall picture of this year is we had pretty significant snow drought with a lack of snowpack in the lower elevations, the mid elevations of the mountains. And so that kind of complicates the picture when we look at the summer. So let's jump into the fire outlooks. So these graphics are going to show the significant wildfire potential outlook, which is a product created by NIFC and the various geographic coordination centers. These are the experts that work in fire and coordinate with all the various wildland firefighting agencies to create these outlooks. And so they're looking at various kind of soil moisture, snowpack, precipitation, temperature, what the fuels are doing in the wildland interfaces, and trying to figure out how the fire activity is going to evolve. And so what they're projecting for July is showing up here on this map. And you'll see a lot of areas in the west are highlighted in red, which is showing the potential for above normal wildfire activity. And some of the factors that are driving this, it really comes down to a depleted snowpack. So the snowpack has really melted out earlier than normal for a lot of areas, especially in the west. And that's just due to the really warm winter that we had. If you look at the winter, especially closer to home, it was a top 5 warmest winter ever. So a lot of the snow that we typically see in the mountains fell as rain, especially below about 7,000 feet. So the snowpack melted out early, and that is a huge factor in this wildfire outlook. Another factor is our growing season started much earlier than normal. And when that occurs, it allows for the green up to occur early, and it allows for the fuels to potentially cure early as well if we start getting these heat waves. Looking into August, that you can see that this is the August outlook for the fire potential. And you can see starting to see some red areas expand closer into the Missoula area, kind of western Montana. You notice all of the Idaho Panhandle is lit up. So that includes the Clearwater and the Nez Perce National Forest west of Missoula. You also see areas east of the Divide in southwest Montana. Pretty much all of the Pacific Northwest is highlighted on this map as well. And this is really important when it comes to one of our prime months for smoke production from wildfires. You'll see that some of the bigger source regions in Northern California up through the Pacific Northwest are highlighted. And we'll talk about Canada here in a minute, but that's also another region we're going to look into. And so what stands out for August, really just much higher confidence from the various fire partners and the geographic coordination centers that we're going to be seeing the susceptible fuel conditions. So thinking about some of the larger fuels, the bigger trees starting to really dry out with that increased heat wave frequency, especially in Idaho and the Pacific Northwest standing out. And then there's going to be an increase in lightning events, some of that tropical activity that we talked about earlier, the monsoon. Some of these monsoon pushes, the leading edge of that monsoon moisture, where it's warm and dry in the low levels, but there's that moisture aloft that's streaming in. Those are the big lightning days in our neck of the woods. So whenever we start to see the initial waves of thunderstorms moving in from the south, that's kind of our watch out. Those are the watch out days. One thing that stands out for our area, though, is when we looked at those analog years, we do see the potential for some wetting rains, especially as we get into the mid to late part of August. Some of these tropical systems that potentially could be moving northward through the desert southwest into our area could provide quite a bit of wetting rains if they come together. So that's something we're going to be monitoring this summer. And then transitioning into summer, locally, one things that are transitioning to September, one thing that stands out is you do see a reduction in the fire potential outlook across the Idaho, Panhandle, and the Clearwater National Forest and east of the Divide. And that's a reflection of that potential for an increase in moisture and precipitation kind of in the second half of August with that monsoon activity and tropical moisture. But do take note that just California and the Pacific Northwest, some of those bigger source regions for smoke and fires are still highlighted in red. And that's really one thing that stands out when we look at this outlook is some of those centers west of us feel like there could be an alignment of critical fire weather days where we have higher than normal potential for wind events after all those lightning events in August. Finally, this is the Canadian fire outlook. So this is kind of a coordination between the US and Canada. This is a map that kind of brings everything together. And you'll see one thing that I really want to draw your attention to is if we look at British Columbia, you'll see a lot of areas in red starting this month into July. And they've already seen some fires already in British Columbia, and that's been driven by a drought, especially across southern British Columbia this year. They had quite a bit of snowpack, but that snowpack has melted out fairly early this year due to fairly warm spring conditions. So this is one of the source regions for smoke that we're going to be monitoring pretty closely this year. If we get some big fires up in Canada and some northwest flow, this is one of the areas that we can get a lot of smoke into our area from. I think that's all I have for you guys today as far as the fire and smoke outlook from the Weather Service goes. I'm happy to turn it back over to Amy.
Great, and I think we're going to do all our questions at the end. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and we are going to turn back over to the folks up in the Flathead.
All right. Nope, I don't have a mic on. Thanks, Amy. We're going to share a screen and invite Kyle up. Make sure your mic's working. Button on the bottom there. And let me pull up his presentation. I've got a quick introduction to do for you too here, Kyle. So Kyle is the Director of Climate Extension for the Montana Climate Office, based at the University of Montana, where he also is an assistant research professor in the College of Forestry and Conservation. In addition to his engagement and partnership with communities around the state, Kyle specializes in cross-disciplinary computational approaches to studying resilience in socioecological systems, excuse me. Thanks. Was this on? No. Bottom button. Hello. Hi. Thank you, everyone. Do people hear me over in Missoula? At home? Thanks. Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction and thanks for putting this together. It's a really good opportunity to remind ourselves about some of the dangers that come with this season and to get some good insights from very smart people about what's going on. I'm going to be talking about two things today. First of all, I'm here from the Montana Climate Office. I'm actually up from Missoula. I drove up here to give this talk, even though there's another event going on in Missoula. And part of the reason was I've been doing a lot of work across Western Montana with the Climate Office. The Montana Climate Office was established in 2013 by Governor Schweitzer to be the state's primary stewards of climate data. We work closely with the Montana Library in order to steward the climate data sets. Our mission is to provide high quality, timely, relevant, and scientifically based climate insights for all Montanans. We do two primary things. One, we run the largest weather station network in the state, and it's rapidly growing. So a lot of the data that we produce is flowing into the National Weather Service in order to create the forecasts that Alex was talking about.
And the second thing is we sit on the governor's drought and water supply committee, drought monitoring subcommittee. So we participate in drought assessment for the state every week. You can get to everything I'm going to show you at this URL at climate.umt.edu. I wanted to give you a little rundown of some of the data that we're really focusing on when we're looking at the fire season. And it starts with this tool. Can you move that thing? Yeah, that. Thank you. It starts with this tool, which is called D3 Drought. This is our drought dashboard that we produce here. And what I'm showing you is a product called SPEI, the Standardized Precipitation and Evapotranspiration Index. What it really means is just water balance. It's the amount of water that's coming down from the sky versus the amount of water that's evaporating or transpiring out of our plants, right? The red areas are where the water is leaving the Earth's surface at a faster rate than normal over the last 30 years. The blue areas are where the water is coming to the Earth's surface at a faster rate than normal over the last 30 years. And so what we see is that since October 1st, this is showing us the water year since October 1st, we've seen a wetter than normal conditions for much of Western Montana. But the rest of the state has been average to drier than normal. And we've experienced this. We have those big atmospheric river events in November and December. We had a pretty wet winter when it all comes down to it, even though it was warm. And so we didn't have those mid to lower elevation snows. But portions of southwestern Montana saw some of their driest conditions. So that darkest maroon area down in southwestern Montana near the Big Hole, that was some of the driest conditions that they'd experienced in the last 30 years in this water year. So we've got this tale of two extremes when it comes to Montana. Ooh. I'm wandering away from this, and that means it's not clicking. Can you just click the screen real quick? There you go. I got it. Great. So this is precipitation just over the last 15 days. We all know we had a huge precipitation event across a lot of the northern tier of our state. It was a really helpful event for the state, and it sort of reset some of our weather. That extreme storm from May 30th to June 2nd dropped historic precipitation, with parts of the High Line getting over 7 inches of precipitation over this 15-day period. We talked to a lot of producers across the High Line and in the Golden Triangle, and one producer told us that was $1 million event for them. It saved their crop for the season. It was looking dry, and then it's reset soil moisture and reset some of that critical water. It worked this time. This is that same data, except now I'm showing it to you in that same percentile space. So blue is wetter than normal, and yellows are drier than normal. So over the last 15 days, what we saw is that for this 15-day period, portions of the High Line and Western Montana, going all the way over to the North Dakota border, we're seeing some of the wettest conditions on record. So we usually are wet this time of year, but the last couple of weeks have been a lot wetter than normal. And that's translated into soil moisture. This is a model that we developed out of the Climate Office that is actually looking at soil moisture conditions across our state compared to normal. Again, so this is compared to the last 30 years. And what we see is across Western Montana, across the eastern part of the High Line up to the Blackfeet Nation and to the central part of the state, we're seeing some historically wet conditions across our state. This is shallow soil moisture, and then if you go down, this is going down to 50 centimeters. So this is telling us that that we've got a lot of nice residual moisture in the ground for our plants. That's super important for our fire forecasts, right? That's what's keeping our fuels moist and making it so that they're not very incendiary. What we want is a continual parade of these storms. We want nice wet conditions as we move in. What we heard from Alex is that that's not the prediction for the next couple of months. So time will tell, but we're starting off in a good place right now. Now, if I were talking to you a month and a half ago, I was really concerned. This is snowpack. This is from April 1st You don't have to look up in the upper left-hand corner. April 1st snowpack across our state, just as Alex said, was low down low and high up high. So we had in our mid to lower elevations, if any of you are skiers, you know that once you got to the bottom of the mountain, you were sometimes skiing on mud and rocks, right? It was historically low snowpack at mid and lower elevations. Our upper elevations, though, some places like Stewart Peak, where Snowbowl is, that snowtell station was at its highest on record snowpack around the April 1st timeframe. So we had a really weird winter. Our warm winter led to an earlier than normal snow melt, including some midwinter melts. We can take that same data, but now I'm going to average over water basins. So this is over hydrologic areas. Those white areas are normal. They're anywhere between 30 to 70% percentile, which is right in the middle. Those areas that trend yellow to red to maroon are those drier than normal areas, and then blue is slightly wetter than normal in terms of our snowpack. So what we see is that in the aggregate, Western Montana went into the melt season with a below average snowpack. So if you take those mid to low elevations where we had very little snow, sometimes historically low snow, and then those highest elevations, which had a lot of snow, and you average across the whole area in terms of the amount of water that was in that snowpack, we tended to be lower than normal. So we were starting at a deficit there. That's why I was worried in April. Now I'm not so worried because of that reset that we had from this storm. But the rest of the West was far, far worse than we are. And this really gets into our smoke forecast, where we look at the Colorado River Basin, the Arkansas and Red Rivers flowing out of the eastern side of Colorado, the Great Basin in Utah and Nevada, and in the Sierras, and then going up into the Cascades, we saw historically low snowpack. In some cases, record low snowpack, especially in the Colorado River Basin. So portions of the Central and Southern Rockies saw their lowest on record, and that leads us to really worry about both water supply and our smoke and fire forecasts. So here's just a summary. Warm conditions through the winter were worrisome. A wet spring gave us some much needed moisture and sort of reset the clock. So now we're looking at, in Western Montana, what's going to happen over the next couple of months. If we keep having these nice wet storms come through, I'm going to be feeling good. If we start having a rapid dry down, a flash drought like we had in 2017, then we'll be worried. But more broadly, the Western US is very parched. And so we've got a potential for widespread smoke events, as Alex was talking about. So I want to shift a little bit into the future, because the other thing the Climate Office does is we participate in the Montana Climate Assessment. We were one of the, along with Climate Smart Missoula and many others, one of the authors of the 2017 Montana Climate Assessment that really was focused on how our state is going to look going into the future. Over the last couple of years, my office has updated the climate projections section of the Montana Climate Assessment to use the latest generation of climate models. So it's called CMIP6, the Coupled Model Intercomparison Project. This is running you down the data sets that we're using because I believe in sharing that with people. We're using a downscaled climate model from NASA called NASA NEXT. That's the model, and we do an ensemble of 8 different models in order to show you the data I'm about to show you, in order to get a sense of the spread of how different climate models are. I'm going to show you, we model multiple shared socioeconomic pathways. There was some news a couple of weeks ago that, we hear about these climate models. We used to talk about representative concentration pathways, the amount of greenhouse gases that were in the atmosphere. With CMIP6, we started talking about shared socioeconomic pathways. These are both the representation of the greenhouse gases, but how the world's responding as well. Are we all coordinating and working together in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or are we competing against one another? So I'm going to be showing you not the worst, not the best, but one of the messy middle ones in these maps. And I'm showing it to you for mid-century. So this is from this newest generation of climate models that change in average temperature going into the middle of the century, where we see an increase, where we expect to see an increase in temperatures across the state of Montana, anywhere between 4 and 5 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century. That's averaged over the year, but if we break it up by region and break it up by month, we see some interesting patterns. Most of our increased temperatures is going to be happening during our summers and during our winters. That's important for us to know. In Western Montana, August and September, those late summer months are some of our most intense increases in temperature. Other parts of the state, like the eastern part of the state, also see some increases in winter temperature. So peak fire season is expected to be hotter in the future. That's the takeaway from this. What about precipitation? Well, this is showing you an increase in precipitation across the state, but it's very subtle. Okay, between 1/2 inch and 2.5 inches of precip increases across the state by mid-century. All regions of Montana are expected to experience wetter conditions. But when is it coming? What we see is a shift in seasons. We're going to start seeing more precipitation during the spring, during March, April, May, when we have our peak snowpack, and less precipitation during those summer months. So our peak fire season is not only going to be warmer than normal in the future, based on these projections, but also drier in the future. That water that comes in March, April, and May, it's really going to depend on how that water comes, right? Are we going to have a winter like we had in this one, where we had low snowpack across lower elevations, or is it going to come as snow? That's a big question. So the future wildfire summary is Montanans will likely experience warmer and drier summers in the future than we have historically. Our shifting seasonal timing of precipitation may exacerbate fire conditions, depleting snow reservoirs and increasing fuel loads. Something I didn't mention, but maybe we'll hear from later, is that can also stress our forests and lead to more pest outbreaks and drought stress. And then we always have to think of the economic, even though I don't do socioeconomics, you have to think of the economic impact that there's widespread extreme fire years across where there's a lot of fire happening simultaneously across the West really can tax our limited firefighting resources and economic resources. So if we think of analogs, as Alex was talking about looking into the past for analog years, I want to suggest that this year, if it pans out the way the Climate Prediction Center says, might be a good analog for our future as we're thinking about how to prepare for the middle of the century. You can explore all of these data in an interactive tool on our website. It's right there. You can get to it at climate.umt.edu, where you can click your county. You can view these data and all of the different models that go into it for yourself. And then we translated those into some vegetation trends as well for our producers. So that's it. Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt? All right. Next, we've got Mike up. I'm going to pull his presentation up real quick here. All right, and I've got a little intro for you as well. I'm sure you appreciate it. Yeah. Mike is the fire prevention and mitigation specialist for the Flathead National Forest. He serves as the coordinator of FireSafe Flathead, a multi-agency and neighborhood council that has facilitated thousands of acres of cross-boundary hazardous fuels mitigation. Mike was recently named the recipient of the National 2026 Wildfire Mitigation Award. This award recognizes West's extraordinary leadership in protecting Montana communities through innovation, federal, local partnerships.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, again, Mike West with the Flathead National Forest. I do fire prevention, mitigation work. And yeah, it's cool to know Kyle's involved with that Montana MISO net. As a wildland firefighter for 26 years, we watch the weather like a hawk, and we're referencing his data all the time. So it's good to know we've got good folks at the helm helping us out with the weather forecasting. And yeah, I've got clicking those slides here. Advance it.
There you go.
Yeah, so here, I know this isn't applicable to everybody because we have an audience out there virtually in Missoula, but this is for the Kalispell dispatch area. So this would be like Glacier Park, Flathead National Forest, Northwest Montana, DNRC. So a pretty large area. And it's just kind of a year in review. I always like to kind of go back and look at the prior year. So you can see there the statistics from last year was a pretty low fire year for us, you know, so that was good. That freed us up to go help out folks in other places that you know, we're having a more significant fire season. One thing I like to point out on here on this slide is the lightning caused fires at 36%. So that's pretty good. That means, you know, if I'm doing my firefighter math right, 74% of our fires last year were human caused. So that puts us about 10% lower than the national average for human caused fires. So that means in the fire prevention world, we're doing something right. So that's positive. And then a lot of our large fires last year were in very remote areas, if you recall, you know, Bob Marshall Wilderness, way up to North Fork, down in the Swan. So we actually had some fires last year that we, you know, took pretty minimal suppression action on in an effort to free up firefighting resources for other places, given the fact we had a pretty moderate fire season and just the resistance to control. So yeah, we'll jump to the next. And then yeah, this slide here shows some statistics kind of 1994 to present. So if you look over on the right side there, you know, our extreme fire years, if you broke this out into groups of extreme, above average, average, below average. So you can see there, you know, basically 2001 through 2017, we had some pretty significant fire years, you know, and if you look at 235,000 acres to, you know, 82,000 acres. So when we do have big fire years here, the resistance to control is really challenging and fires do get very large. And then if you look at where we landed last year, 2025, you can see there we were, and this is just the data for the Flathead National Forest. So we were definitely pretty low fire start year and low acreage burn. So hopefully we land somewhere in that average or below average. And the way I'm reading the tea leaves and the way things were teed up for me, I would tend to agree. The jury's still out. We could deal with some fires, but if we can continue to catch some precipitation here in June and a shot or two over the summer, I think we'll be in pretty good shape, but we'll see what happens in October. And then if you look here is just an interesting slide. If you look back at the fire history for the Flathead National Forest and a good segment of Northwest Montana, you can see the 1889 to 1930, you know, lots of large fires. You can see 1910 on that lower graph was just like off the charts for acres burned. And then if you see, we kind of had a cool, moist climatic period there, you know, in the 1930s to 80. And that was kind of the peak of the fire suppression era and a cool, moist climatic period. And then you can see things as we got into the 1980s to kind of present, you know, how much more fire we have out there on the landscape. So that's kind of an interesting slide. And then really this is the meat of what I was asked to talk about, is what can we do? What can homeowners do? What can the public do to reduce their wildfire risk? You know, 65% of the population in the Flathead County lives in the wildland urban interface or lives out where homes or businesses commingle with the forest or where there's a risk of wildfire, right? So that's a pretty high percentage of our population. So we've as FireSafe Flathead, we've created some products for the community to help them understand, how we can all do our part to reduce wildfire risk. So this is a handout that's back there on the back table if folks are interested, or feel free to reach out to me or go to FireSafeFlathead.com and choose some products. But yeah, you can see the most important thing to do is just to focus on that area immediately around your home. That 0 to 5 feet, 5 to 30 feet, definitely the most critical. Clean out your gutters, just looking at all those little things. There was a Jack Cohen, I believe, was driving around California looking at all these communities that have been impacted by wildfires, and as a scientist trying to determine like which homes burned down and which ones didn't and kind of why, right? And he noticed a trend that all the homes with the for sale signs in the yards were the ones still standing. And why is that? Because their grass was green, their lawn was mowed, everything was tidied up, picked up, cleaned up. You know what I mean? So if you look at your property through that lens of like, it's those little things that matter, that whether your home is gonna ignite in a wildfire or not. Just cleaning up clutter and debris and just simple little things around your house. Spring cleaning goes a long ways. And then if you look here, we have a bunch of folks out in this area ready and willing to help the public, any landowners. Again, FireSafe Flathead, we meet the third Wednesday of each month over at the state office here in Kalispell, the DNRC office, from 9 to 11. Anyone's welcome to attend or reach out. We have contacts on our website. But yeah, this just displays the different programs around the area that'll come out and do site visits, right? Help you write forest management plans if you're interested in that, and provides financial incentives, assuming it's available. Financial incentives aren't always available everywhere all the time, so it's kind of a moving target there. But again, yeah, just trying to get it out there in the community of resources and how we can help folks. And then and then here's a map. This is just a snapshot. If you can see the community of Whitefish there, and kind of west of Kalispell and Whitefish. This map is displaying fuel reduction treatments that have been accomplished or planned in the near term under contract or pending near term implementation. So you can see the green stuff, that's all the Flathead National Forest, thinning, fuel mitigation, trying to reduce the amount of fuel out there on the forest available in a wildfire situation. And this area is especially important because like our large fires tend to move from west to east or southwest to northeast. So any large fire getting established on the national forest in this area on one of those extreme years is going to be headed for town, right into the community where there's thousands and thousands of homes and people that would be impacted. So, and then you can see the blue land, that's the DNRC's trust lands work they're doing. Then the brown land is that's Stoltz Land and Lumber Company. So I think this is just a good representation of like the large land managers are taking this fuel mitigation fire situation pretty serious. Like you look at those future climate scenarios and it doesn't bode well for the fire situation. So it's kind of not like an if, but when, and getting ready for fire adapted communities, kind of changing the language to like, are you ready for fire? And I think this kind of paints the picture of like, well, we're getting ready, and not just for fire, but that forest health aspect of the climate modeling. And what we're currently experiencing is like we have a surplus of trees in those drought situations. The forest health, conditions just deteriorate rapidly. So like removing the excess trees out there and the unhealthy trees and trying to shift the forest back to a condition of like pre-fire suppression, like historical norms where, maybe we had 20 to 100 trees per acre, where now you go out to those, or 0 trees per acre. We have a lot of areas in the Flathead that were completely unforested, 100, 200 years ago. That now have 2, 3, 4, 5,000 trees per acre. So yeah, trying to move us back to a forest condition with less trees and more frequent fire of lower intensity that's easier. So encouraging here is just another part of that 2-pager is just letting folks know what they can do. You know, if you look at the statistics here, 7 million acres of Montana's forested lands are privately owned. So trying to get the community to buy in and help us out with that, you know, landscape scale, fire fuel reduction effort. And then hopefully not hopefully, like when we have the inevitable wildfire, whether it's lightning cause or human cause, we'll have less smoke, you know, we'll have less impacts to our community and be ready. So yeah, I think that's a wrap for me.
Excellent. Bring it back from you. All right, Katie, we're gonna hand it back off to you.
All right, give me just a minute here.
You're on mute, Amy, it looks like.
Are you folks seeing the display view again, or is it the full screen?
No display view, you're not in presentation mode currently.
Let's see.
Looks good.
Great. Let's see, we're not seeing it though. Oh, I guess we are. It's just here. Okay, so you guys are. I think we're back in business here. Let me make sure that it's going to move forward. Okay, my screen's a little funny, but I can deal with that. Okay, thanks, everyone. We're going to do a last bit of this talk is talking a little bit more about wildfire smoke. But before we do that, I did just want to mention just what the folks are talking up in Flathead. We also have similar opportunities here to think about our ecosystems and wildfire protection for homes. In fact, you can just Google or search for Missoula Voice, and in Missoula County has a whole program right now where we're actually assessing our community wildfire protection plan. And it's ripe for conversations right now. People are looking at where, how we can best protect some of our areas where folks live in and around Missoula, in the WUI, and also right here in town. And think about, you know, who's most at risk and what are some of the things we can do. So that's an active program happening right now. And then I'd also be remiss if I didn't at least mention before we get started that wildfires are a natural part of our ecosystem. So as we've been talking about them here, we're a little fearful of fire, perhaps, and we're fearful of the smoke that may come our way. But we also know that, as that first graph showed with the spikes in fires in the Flathead a decade or a century ago, we do see fires, and a lot of our forests are adapted to fire. They need fire. It's just we're trying to manage where those burn and where people live and some of our safety issues. So as we've looked at things in Missoula, we try not to demonize fire. We're just trying to figure out how we can be as safe as possible. So with that, I'll just talk a little bit about Climate Smart Missoula for a minute or two, and then jump into some of our smoke considerations. So Climate Smart is a local nonprofit here in Missoula that got started about a decade ago. We build and accelerate climate solutions for Missoula and beyond, and love to partner with groups such as Climate Smart Glacier Country. When we first got started about 10 years ago, a little more, one of our first projects and programs was addressing wildfire smoke. We got connected with our health department here and realized that it was one of the changes we're seeing and likely to see given climate change, and realized there wasn't a lot of actions happening around helping people stay healthy during smoke season. So this particular issue has been long-standing for us as we've expanded and done a whole lot more. So just briefly, our efforts at Climate Smart, we kind of think of them as three legs of a stool or sides of a triangle. We do work a lot on resilience or adaptation, addressing the effects of climate change. We also work on mitigation, addressing the root causes of climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, carbon pollution. And then engagement and movement building, bringing people in, having all of us together take action to build a healthier Missoula. And so clearly this is some of the talk we're talking about here is a part of the work that we do around resilience. Thinking about wildfires and the smoke that we receive here. We also have some programs around hotter days and nights, how to stay cool in Missoula, given some of the forecasted high temperatures in the near-term future and projected out. Various extreme weather. We also work a lot on healthy trees and natural systems here in Missoula and Missoula County. Again, we're going to focus in on that smoke piece. And I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown about what's the risk from wildfire smoke, how we can prepare, and how you know the current air quality, just helping folks connect to those resources. And I'm Climate Smart Missoula again, Amy, but we work really closely with Missoula Public Health, and we have some of our air quality specialists here in the room in Missoula. So this is really much a partner effort, and others too. We have a lot of folks that have over the years worked with us on this program of staying healthy. I think it's just worth knowing that what we are concerned about in wildfire smoke, mostly from especially the natural fires that we tend to get smoke from out here, is PM 2.5, fine particulate matter that is less than 2.5 microns. So it's very, very small. And if you see this picture, first on the lower left, there's a tiny, tiny piece of fine beach sand. And then you can see the width of a hair. And then the circles on that band that make a band around that hair are PM10. Those are things like dust and pollen and mold. And PM 2.5 is obviously a quarter of that or smaller. So these are combustion particles, organic compounds, all the things that are super, super small. And those are the things that research has shown, especially over this last decade, are just dangerous to our health. They go deep into our lungs. They actually get so deep into the lungs that they can pass into the bloodstream and cause an inflammatory response. They can affect our immune systems. There's even new research that offers that these fine particulate matter in air pollution can pass the blood-brain barrier, issues of cognitive decline and things that can come from air pollution. So it's really not something that we want to breathe in. Our lungs can't just cough it up, okay? Too small for that. Some of the health effects of smoke, especially from PM 2.5, it's, some of it is just the things you notice when you're out in smoke. You're coughing, you have headaches, and maybe your lungs aren't working quite as well. And people that have COPD or asthma are aggravated. We do, when we have a lot of smoke and it's an event that lasts for more than a day or two, we start to see emergency room hospital visits increase, pneumonia complications, even stroke and heart attack. And then, as I mentioned, prolonged periods of smoke can actually been linked to cognitive decline. And then, of course, there's mental health issues when we're in the doom and gloom of smoke, especially if it is something that lasts or a summer filled with smoke. So we need to consider all of these things. Who's most at risk? We do have some specific sensitive groups. Babies and children, 18 and younger are all more susceptible. Older adults, lung and cardiovascular systems simply don't work quite as well. Those with chronic health problems and pregnant people are some of our categories. Really, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of, look at all those groups. It really adds up to a lot of us. And we, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are all susceptible to smoke. Even our pets and animals, wild or domesticated, do feel the impacts of smoke. So given all of that, I'm not going to speak too much around behavior and things. We aren't having smoke right now, but the idea here is to help us make sure that we are prepared for when and if the smoke just does come, as we heard earlier, this hot and dry potential for July and August. And mostly the question we often ask people as we're out talking to folks is, do you have a way to clean your indoor air? The research has shown, especially in these last decades, a lot of great research done here in Missoula and at the university, that having a way to clean your indoor air simply works and can keep you and your family much healthier. So we have basic HEPA air cleaners. It sounds like folks up in the Flathead know what these are. We here in Missoula know what they are. We can share more about the ins and outs of what to look for in a portable air cleaner, but you can move them around your house. You can have more than one, bedrooms, living areas, and they simply work fantastic. They do get dirty. Inside that air cleaner is a filter. And this is a photo of a brand new one over on the right, and then one after a smoky season on the left. When they get that dirty, they're not going to work as well, and it's time to replace them. So one of the preparations you can make right now in this wet June that we're having is to get a filter and potentially stock air cleaner and stock up on some extra filters just in case. We do like to pay attention to what the air quality is. Again, it's clear and great right now, but it's just important to know that we have a scale that's being used pretty much all around the country so that we're kind of all talking the same language. It's called the AQI, or Air Quality Index, and these colors are just very helpful. We've got really good air now, but it zones over to from unhealthy all the way over to hazardous. And what's great about this, if you aren't familiar with this, is these different categories are linked to suggested activities and behaviors that you might want to consider if we do have smoke. So we just like to get the word out that fire.airnow.gov is a wonderful website, and bookmark it, and hopefully you won't need it for a while, but it's going to be there showing us what the air quality is. And it's also important if there are some prescribed fires, you might want to check in on that. So what I wanted to also just show you is we have a website that we keep up with Missoula Public Health. So Carrie and I can work on this. We can add a lot of information to it over the years. We started it after that 2017 really horrible hazardous fires that we had in at least Missoula County. It was a bad fire year, and really people didn't know what to do about smoke, where to go, what behaviors to change, and how to stay healthy. So we created this website, and we try to keep it up on MontanaWildfireSmoke.org. We have links to that, a couple different ways that you can learn about the actual air quality. And then we have lots of information on how to clean your indoor air. I mentioned the HEPA air cleaners. If you are trying to prepare a larger building, a commercial space, a business, a school, there are more considerations to take, and actually using your air handling system and making that clean it's more complicated than just changing a filter. Those systems need to be looked at with potentially an HVAC technician, and you want to spend a little time understanding what it is you could do for larger air quality, for your air quality with those larger, more complex systems. But there in that clean indoor air section, there's both what to do as an individual and also what you might want to do if you're trying to condition a larger commercial space. So check that out. And then I just wanted to point out, if you do, toggle along the top there, in those, we have a whole section on this website about public places and those clean air centers that Adam mentioned at the very beginning. We do have information on that particular part of our website about where those clean air centers are in Ravalli, Missoula County, and then we've added Flathead, and hopefully there'll be some others along the way. The folks up in the at CSKT, Flathead Indian Reservation, are also setting up some clean air centers. Out in Lincoln County, they're setting up some of these clean air centers, and we'll have information about where those are and when they're open. And again, the idea there is that they are a place that has clean air that we've tried to condition. They have purple air monitors indoors, so you can see what the air quality is indoor and compare that to the outdoor air. And then each of these sites will have resources available. If you or you're talking to your neighbor or somebody, a friend, and they're not familiar with wildfire smoke issues, you can go to one of these centers and pick up some of the resources that we have. Yeah, so that's just what what that looks like. That little dot on the over to the right there is a purple air monitor. And these are what are set up, connected to the internet. And so you can go to locations and see what the air quality is because that little monitor will be running inside. So check that out. And just simply, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in some of this smoke ready work, whether you're up in the Flathead or you're down here in Missoula. Get your air cleaner, maybe talk to your neighbors, maybe get one for a neighbor that doesn't have the means or isn't out and about shopping. Consider whether your business or a business that you frequent has a way to clean the air. You can help with some of the summer outreach. We're going to be talking to folks, tabling around Missoula, especially in July and August as the summer heats up and dries out. And then, of course, visit a clean air center. So engage with, again, whether you're in Missoula or the Flathead, engage with us and we'll hook you up to stay involved. So thank you for being here. And again, I wanted to also just thank all our sponsors for this event. And it's been kind of fun to connect with Flathead. Again, we have similar issues and approaches to helping our community stay healthy. I think with that, I can pass it back to the folks in the Flathead, and you guys are collecting some of the questions that people have. We've, just so you guys know, we here have written some questions out on cards, and then Abby, my colleague, has been typing some of them in to the Q&A. Is that right? All right, so we've got a collection of folks here that have been asking some questions, and we'll see where this goes. Oh, and yeah, I think that if Adam, you're coming up, I think this is a great, oh, I got to stop sharing. Aha. It says I stopped sharing.
If you added your name at the front there to that list, we'll be sure to send you a recording, all the slides.
Okay, Steve, if you're chatting with all of us, we're not hearing you here.
Okay, sir. Okay, how about now?
Are you able to hear me now, Amy?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, so if anybody has any questions here in Kalispell, you can bring them up on a note card, or we will we can pass the mic, although they won't be on camera for our friends in Zoom world. But we've got quite a few questions, so we'll just jump into it. A question for probably Alex or Kyle. Will expansion of the Hadley cell be of concern? And can you tell us what the Hadley cell is? So how do you want that, or we want to turn that over to Alex?
Well, I'd like to defer to the National Weather Service. I can tell you what.
Come on over, Alex.
I can tell you what the Hadley cells are. I don't know about the expansion of them, but Hadley cells are caused in part by the rotation of the Earth and have to do with the way in which our trade winds flow. I mean, that's about the extent of my explanation of it, but I don't know much about the expansion of the Hadley cells.
Alex.
Yeah, just to add what Kyle said, that's not one of my areas of expertise, but to expand on what Kyle said, the planet basically has very large scale circulations that drive the planetary weather patterns, and the Hadley Sail is one of those circulations. But I am not familiar with ongoing research on the expansion of the Hadley Sail, unfortunately.
Mike, do you have any expertise on that? Okay. Okay. Thank you for that question, Tony. Mark that one done. A question from the audience in Missoula. While you talk about monsoon fire risks from lightning strikes, what about the high wind, which also carries fire strikes from down power lines? Could you please address the wind risk connected to fire, please?
Yeah, I think I can take that one. One of the trends of late has been these pretty significant windstorms that we've had, at least in western Montana. And those have been driven by dry thunderstorm activity, where we have kind of warm and dry conditions in the low levels and a lot of moisture and instability aloft. And so when that happens, we're kind of ripe for these really strong, damaging wind events, specifically during kind of the July through September time period. And that's definitely something that the energy partners, the various utility companies are really starting to get more involved with, is they've started to invest in a lot of weather stations and also sophisticated cameras that can detect wildfires as they're starting. So there's definitely a lot of investments that are being made by those utility companies to try to pick up on those fires as they're starting. And that's definitely one of the things that the National Weather Service focus on during the summer, is providing warnings for those really strong thunderstorms that have those strong and potentially damaging winds.
Mike, do you want to respond to that question at all?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I think that was a pretty good summary. I would agree. I know, working with our local utility partners, they're certainly taking the wildfire mitigation seriously and have wildfire mitigation plans, and then do a lot of fuel reduction and hazard tree mitigation along their power line infrastructure to reduce the potential for wildfire ignition during fire season or some associated wind event. But wind also needs to be accompanied or combined with low relative humidity and reasonably not super high temperatures, but you need some combination of, high winds, low humidity, higher temperatures, to really, have a problem fire resulting from a wind event. So sometimes it's just better to be lucky than good. Like, you can get high winds, but if it happens to come with reasonable amount of precipitation and, or higher humidities or temperatures, then that's not a bad thing. But when you hit that perfect storm of low humidity, high wind, higher temperatures like that, that's when you have a problem. And then you combine that with drought stress and low fuel moistures, and so it kind of takes perfect storm. Like, you need more than just the wind to drive a fire.
So a follow-up question for Kyle, if you could step up to the podium and microphone there. So anecdotally, a lot of people are talking about the winds seem to be getting stronger just generally. I mean, this year there's definitely been some major wind events outside of fire season, but with a changing, warming climate, more energy in the atmosphere, should we expect more windy conditions and more big wind events?
It's a good question. I've got both a data answer and a physics answer. You just gave the lead to the physics answer. As you get more heat in the atmosphere, you've got more energy for these big storms to cause high wind events. We actually saw this just a month ago. On the 13th and 14th of May across the High Line, we had a significant series of wind events. On the 13th in Havre, they were having a softball tournament, or softball or baseball. I think it was Little League. I think it was baseball. And right about 5 o'clock, a huge storm came in. It had been a really sunny, super hot, dry day. And this storm came in and it had so much energy that it kicked up a huge dust storm. Everybody had already been plowing their fields to seed, and kicked up a huge dust storm. It created this dust bowl condition in Havre and stopped that baseball tournament for a couple hours. The next day, we actually had a frontal system move through that the Weather Service wrote up a real nice blog on, actually, that moved through across the whole High Line. A big frontal system that caused winds to spike 40, 50 mile an hour consistent winds across the High Line with some 70 mile an hour gusts. That created positively Martian conditions across the High Line with that same cloud fields seeding season. And our weather stations caught it. We have cameras on all these weather stations, and you could actually see that dust cloud across eastern Montana, especially up near Plentywood. It was really, really dry. So you get these winds that come with these warmer conditions. But we also have seen it in the data. Right here in Flathead County, down in Lake County, we've done the analysis on winds. We were getting reports from people down on the missions saying, we've noticed that it's just been windier and windier. We actually looked over the last 40 years at wind data across the missions, and we do find that certain seasons, especially April and May, have indeed trended much windier over the last 40 years. And you can see some of those data in that Climate Explorer, which is driven by not the future, it's driven by historical data. So you can see some of those wind trends. We're seeing it on the eastern side of the mountains as well. The Chinooks have trended stronger over the last 40 years as well. These warm, downsloping winds that they get on the Front Range that melts and actually sublimates, evaporates snow off the landscape, again causing drier conditions that can lead to more wildfires. That'd be good.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, that's great. We have a couple related questions, similar questions. One from the audience here in Kalispell and one from Missoula, sort of two angles to the same question about the shift toward wetter spring conditions. So one question related to increased precipitation in the spring, as well as less freezing in the winter. Does that mean more pests? And what's the impact on our forests and streams by having wetter springs and warmer, less freezing winters? The second part of the question related to that is fuel loading. So fine fuels from a lot of spring moisture. Is that moisture good or bad?
I'll take just one part of the question, okay, and I'll pass it off if that's all right. In terms of the hydrology, we do see increasing rain on snow events. These are warm storms that can happen in the winter time where we have a big snowpack, and you can have two hydrologic responses. The first is that you do get melting of the snowpack, so the moisture goes into the snowpack, then melts out the bottom. And the second is that you get flooding. And we saw that during some of our early winter storms. We saw snowpack that had accumulated in the high country that melted rapidly, causing flooding both directly from the precipitation and from that melting snowpack in places like Libby. Remember the flooding in November in Libby. We can see that in the springtime as well. Another example of that, of where we had high snowpack that was primed to melt, and then we had a big rain on snow event, were the Yellowstone floods that you all remember. That was a really big snowpack year, but we had a warm period that snow was ready to melt, and then we had a Category 5 atmospheric river, a big precipitation event right about this time in June. I think it was June 6th. When that event came through and melted that snowpack rapidly, causing all of the challenges downstream. And so yeah, major hydrologic impacts that we can expect from rain on snow events and increased precipitation, if that precipitation comes as rain on top of current snowpack.
Yeah, thanks. And then, yeah, Mike West here. again with the Flathead National Forest. Yeah, as far as the kind of a multi-part question there, but the fine fuel is the grasses, orbs, leaves, right? The really small stuff out there, less than a 1/4 inch diameter. And we refer to that stuff as firefighters as the fine fuels or the 1 hour fuels, because it only takes 1 hour for that stuff to dry out or respond to changes in atmospheric temperature and moisture. So certainly, yeah, if we're having these earlier green ups and wetter springs, and then that leads to a higher fine fuel loading, so taller grass, more of it, and then we trend into these warmer and drier summer months, then certainly, yeah, there's going to be a relationship there of faster moving fires with higher resistance to control, just to do that fine fuel loading. I've seen that in my career down the desert Southwest. You'll get a big wet winter, a big wet season, and then areas that were sparse grass or maybe ankle deep grass, all of a sudden it's like waist high or chest high grass out in the desert, and you get 500,000 million acre fires and that stuff, and it's really hard to put out because it burns very hot and quick. So yeah, there could definitely be an issue there going forward. And then the other part of the question, I think, was related to forest health and like warmer temperatures in the winter months. And I'm not an entomologist or the expert on this, but I do understand. My understanding is that there is a correlation between warmer winters can lead to increases in, say, mountain pine beetle or other forest pathogens that normally, like, multiple weeks of sub-zero, below zero temperatures would tend to knock their populations back, where I don't see that happening as much going forward. And then just my casual observations of living here my whole life and spending a ton of time out in the forest is that you can see the effects of the forest pathogens, between not just pine beetles or in mountain pine beetle, but root disease in the Flathead National Forest is significant, and it's really affecting our Douglas fir populations and other true fir species. So I see that everywhere. And then I've also noticed and I don't know if there's science to support this, but just my casual observations is we have this place called like the thermal belt, right? So in the summer months, it's always warmer and drier at nighttime in those mid elevations. And what I've noticed is a decline in forest health in that thermal belt. So if you're below the thermal belt in the low elevations, valley bottom, the forests are doing much better because they're getting better humidity recoveries or more moisture in the evenings. And it's my theory. And then if you get above the thermal belt in the higher elevations, the forest health seems to be better off. But man, those mid elevations, especially like south or west aspects, because they're just getting baked, 80, 90, 100 degree temperatures all day. Humidity's down into the teens, single digits. And then we watch your mesonet super closely, and you go look at those mid elevation weather stations in the summer months, and the humidity's only getting to 20-30%. And the temperatures are staying 60 to 70 degrees all night. So those mid elevations, they're just not catching a break like ever. So yeah, definitely. And then a lot of the times in those mid elevations, due to that decline in forest health and, higher temperatures, lower humidities, we can actually see more active fire behavior at night than we do during the daytime. So definitely a cause for concern there, and how that's kind of all connected.
May I add one more thing to this?
Sure, we've got about 4 minutes left. We want to wrap by 7:30, so if you can do a quick
Got it.
response.
Yeah,
We have a couple more questions from Mike.
Okay, just real quick. This is all there's a lot of feedbacks in this too. So post fire, some really interesting research coming out of the Sierra Nevadas is showing that that fire scars, places that have burned, actually hold on to their snow less. And it's not because of the solar radiation directly, but it's because of snags or burned trees putting ash down onto snow fields and increasing what's called the albedo of that snow. It makes it like it's darker surface. It pulls in more sunlight and causes faster melt times in our snowpack. So there are feedbacks going on here too, where fires lead to less snowpack, which can lead to more fire permanent phase.
Thanks, Kyle. Mike, one very quick question. I think you should be able to answer this quickly. Is there a notification system to alert neighbors of prescribed burns and smoke risks?
We have emergency notification systems in the county, but those are generally for like wildfire evacuations or other emergencies. Yeah, as far as the notification systems for prescribed fires and smoke, not that I'm aware of, other than our, anytime we're going to go out and ignite the forest intentionally, we do put out media releases and we do social media and Facebook, and we try to get the information out there as much as we can, but it's not like you're going to get an alert on your cell phone because we're planning to prescribe fires. Maybe that's something that could come in the future.
Okay, thanks. Here's another one for you. This will probably have to be our final question. What can the average person do to help prevent wildfire while spending time outside the sun? I was also wondering, what is the highest cause of wildfires in terms of human-caused fire?
The highest cause for human-caused wildfires in Flathead County is debris burning. So that would be, folks like, it's kind of this double-edged sword. We need more fire and we need less fuel. So like in the most cost-effective way to get rid of your excess fuel on your property is to burn it, right? So then we're like trying to mentor folks. We have pile burning workshops, like they can call me and call a number of people at FireSafe would come out like, hey, give them pointers and kind of try to walk them through it. So like, it's not that we're discouraging people from burning, but it's a double-edged sword. We want more burning and less fuel out there, but it is a leading cause of wildfires, generally in that March, April timeframe, where they don't, they're not as big or problem fires, but that's the leading cause.
Okay, I will respond to the.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
real quick. We just wanted to mention from the Missoula end, that question about alerts when you have prescribed fire. If there's smoke, our air quality specialist, Carrie, or her colleague Arden, we do send out alerts, and they go out to the media, and you can sign up to be on their list, and you get an email about those. So in Missoula County, for when there's smoke, whatever time of year, there are folks that can will let folks know what's happening and what the forecast is.
Yeah, and just to add to that, during wildfire season, there's air quality updates that we put out for Missoula County through Missoula Public Health. But in addition to that, Montana DEQ also puts out smoke forecasts for the summer for all of Montana, which is a great resource to learn about the wildfires that are happening. They link to the information about wildfires on NCWeb, and the Montana or the EPA Fire and Smoke Map will also include that information about different fires. And Montana mtfireinfo.org is also a great resource for information about prescribed fires and wildfires that happen throughout the year.
Thank you, Carrie. Just wanted to throw that out there. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks for that, Amy. I guess one more here for you, Mike, and anybody from Missoula. Question is, how are federal land managers planning for this fire season? For example, do they plan to increase prescribed burning in the high-risk areas such as Western Montana?
How are we getting ready for this fire season?
That's the question.
Yeah, we're certainly done lighting things on fire for the spring and fall season. To my knowledge, at least on the Flathead National Forest and in this area. Yeah, so more mechanical treatments, but generally we do our burning in the fall, winter, and spring. Like burning or prescribed fire is prohibited in the state of Montana, July, August, September, it's like closed burning season. And we have gotten some exceptions to that to burn in September, but generally right now we're focused on our preparedness or training and onboarding and working towards more of the firefighting part of the year. So getting more prepared that way. But we have ongoing contracts and mechanical fuel reduction processes playing out, all year long, every year. So it's not like we stop mitigating against the fire hazard. But yeah, certainly won't be lighting anything on fire until this fall. Intentionally.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, back over to you, Adam, to wrap things up.
All right, well, I don't have anything more to add to that, so appreciate you all for coming out. Like I said, I'm going to throw the survey back up on the screen here for folks. If you're on the webinar, you'll get an email follow-up with that survey. We'd really appreciate your feedback. Give us cause to do it again in the future if we have the opportunity to. Thanks to all our sponsors and all our presenters. Have a nice night.
Thanks everyone over in the Flathead, and have a great evening.